I'm just waking up. Hi, everyone. I am Celeste with Celestial Medicine, and I thought I would do something a little different today. Those of you that know me personally know that I'm a little bit of like a productaholic when it comes to the world of health and nutrition and even spiritual products. I like to try everything. I am not an expert in this field, but I spend a lot of money on stuff that I think is going to keep me out of the doctor's office because I've seen what happens down that road. So, one of the things that I wanted to try that I finally tried was Noni Juice or Noni Juice. And then I met this fellow, and I will allow him to introduce himself.
Hello, I'm John Davis with Healing Noni from the Big Island, Hawaii.
So, John, you work for this company, right? This is Healing
Yes,
Noni.
yes,
Am
it
I
is
saying it right?
Noni.
It is Noni.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Stay tuned to the end of the video because John is going to share with us the fairly simple process for making Noni juice yourself. If you're like me and you've been buying Noni juice and buying it and buying it and buying it, and you're like, well, this is getting expensive, you might want to learn to cultivate the juice yourself. And I don't know how to do it. He's going to share that with us, and I'm excited to find that out. So stay tuned for that. Okay. And so, what do you do for them exactly?
Well, I've been the customer service representative for our company since 2008.
Okay.
I
Well,
arrived on the island in 2002. So I've been working with the company since almost the beginning of the brand label Healing Noni.
John, please talk a little bit more about what you are feeling, like just the most inspired to share with people that you feel they're not going to find, on a Google search or on YouTube.
Well, there's a lot of information out there about Noni. There are a lot of testimonials and there's a lot of science that you can find. There's a
Yeah.
little bit of misrepresentation of Noni as well, because most companies, because they're not on a farm, are bringing in concentrates
Yeah.
and they're making essentially a Kool-Aid or like
Yeah.
a Sunny Delight, whereas
Right.
we are making fresh squeezed orange juice essentially. In a way, it's a if you had a tree in your backyard, you would be making what we make. And
Thank you.
and
That's what makes your company different is that you operate from a farm. So you have, a basically a pure product and nothing that has been, you know, filled with additives
yeah,
and
and because Noni's unique and it grows in the tropical zones
yeah.
all around the equator, all on every continent. They like to isolate it to the Polynesian triangle because that's where it's very strong in the culture. But in my in the last 15 years, I've talked to people in South America, in Africa, in China, in Australia, all India, all having it grow in their area, whether they had recognized it as a food or they just kicked it out of their yard as a kid,
Yeah.
mad because they stepped in it and it was all squishy in their feet.
Things. Fun to
All
keep.
around the world, I've spoken to people who've had noni in their area. It's growing in the Florida Keys. I
Oh,
had a guy call and said, I got noni growing here and I don't know what to do with it. We just throw the fruit in the on the side of the road in the ditch, and then now it's growing in the ditch. What do
oh,
I do with it? So I gave him some tips on how he could process it. It's very simple to process. So he hasn't called me since. So I think he figured out how to make juice to represent noni in a way that is authentic. Is what we do from a farm based perspective.
mhm.
So working with the fruit itself has kind of changed the way we understand it, or the even differs from the way it's typically been represented in the market, because there's a breakthrough
Oh,
in like what I understand about noni. The breakthrough is that noni has been thought of as a supplement, but noni is a food.
oh,
So when like even on our label carries forward some of the systemic marketing tactic or techniques of the previous frameworks. And that where you might see it says 1 ounce a day or 1 ounce 30 minutes before a meal.
Yeah.
That's really not true.
Right.
In
I
in
wouldn't think so.
you can have it with a meal, after a meal, during a meal. You can have it in a beverage.
Oh,
I like to put it in a like I have a sparkler, one of those contraptions that sparkles your water like a
uh-huh.
soda streamer.
Yeah.
And I'll use the whole bottle. I'll sparkle 28 ounces of water and I'll put
Really?
an ounce of noni, an ounce of lemon juice, and some apple cider vinegar, and then tweak the lemon juice to taste. It's so delicious
I love that
that you will
idea.
drink half the bottle. You'll drink half the bottle, like half of it, and go, whoa. You'll start laughing at kombucha. You'll start laughing at kefir. When you're in the store and you say $5 for 16 ounces, I can go home and make this myself. It's delicious
Well,
and
I like it the way it
invigorating.
is, but that sounds really good.
Right. And though it does work the way it is, that you can cook with it, you can put
What?
it in your
Wait,
eggs,
what?
you
You
can
can
cook
put it in your eggs?
anything that you would use a vinegar for. You
Oh,
can use noni for. It's an analog or
wow.
a photo negative of a vinegar. So a vinegar has acetic acid, which is defined as vinegar, and it's a mature juice. Noni is a mature juice without acetic acid and without alcohol. So what's been misunderstood is typically we have glucogenic maturations or sugar-based maturations,
Right.
kefir, kombucha, wine, vinegar, liquor, beer, kraut, even all starch-based or sugar-based fermentations or maturations. And we conflate maturation to fermentation. The reason is because we don't know of any other kind of maturation, but noni offers us that because it is low in sugar, a fruit that's low in sugar,
Yeah.
due to it being a flowering berry, a very large berry with quite large flowers. If you think of the flower of a raspberry, it's like a hair, but on a noni, it's about an inch in diameter.
Okay.
So it draws all the sugars and starches off of the fruit, leaving it a deficit, matures very rapidly or ripens very rapidly without requiring fermentation. Sugar in our food typically prevents the enzymatic process of digestion or maturation. You have to remove that sugar to activate the full breakdown of a food into a juice or a
Mm.
liquid. You can pick a noni fruit and within 3 days just squeeze it through your fingers like a mush. And then within 3 to 5 weeks, it converts itself. 70% of the fruit becomes liquid. One fruit can produce 4 ounces of juice. And what's left after you press it is 30% of seed and insoluble fiber. So that juice has been completely matured through a non-fermented process. I say maybe we could call it a ketogenic
Okay.
maturation as opposed to a glucogenic maturation, because noni does contain some MCTs
Okay.
and some ketogenic compounds that push it over to the side of like a very low sugar compatible food. It
Mm.
could be some of the reasons that people find energy out of noni when it doesn't have any caffeine or any kind of stimulants. It actually is providing caloric energy through those fatty acids,
Oh,
the MCT and the ketones,
okay.
which process like sugar because there's such a small fatty acid chain
Wow.
that it goes into directly to your liver and must be burnt as energy rather than stored.
Interesting. Okay. So you were telling me something interesting over the phone, and I really want to touch on it here because I think it's really important for people to know is that noni has been referred to in most things that you read or see as a supplement. And you're understanding now that it's not a supplement, it's a food. And tell me a little bit more about that because I don't quite know what makes something a food versus a supplement. I've heard the same thing about like blue-green algae, for example, because of how many like phytonutrients, it's just considered a perfect food. But what makes noni a food as opposed to a supplement?
What's really funny in working with the FDA when you're producing a food or a supplement, they leave it up to you.
Okay.
So it's up to the producer if something is a supplement and
Oh,
going to be labeled and follow the rules that
other
they've
stuff.
set forward for being a supplement, or if it's going to be a food and
Oh,
then follow the rules of whether or not it's food. Blue green algae is a perfect example. Clearly, it's the first food, possibly the first single celled plant that ever existed on the planet,
right,
producing all of our oxygen.
right.
So, therefore, it's a food. But we're taking it as a supplement for some reason. That's how they decided to market it.
Mm.
And it's purely upon the producer to decide which it is. And with Noni, the method for introducing it to the modern diet has been primarily through supplement packaging or marketing.
Okay.
You know, we being a farm, we also started in supplement with a supplement. And if you look at our label, it says supplement facts, not nutritional facts. Some of
Okay.
our labels, the ones that we bring into Costco, the ones that we ship into Canada, have nutritional facts.
Supplement
But
facts.
it really is a distinction that's made by the seller, not the FDA, as to what they're going to label it and what part of the store it sells in. Kind of arbitrary.
Right. Hmm.
Mm.
Well, thanks, FDA. But I mean, I'm glad that they're allowing you to actually speak on it, in a way that is, freeing the consumer up to use it in these myriad of ways, because I know that I have been trying really hard to only drink it in the morning before my coffee, wait 30 minutes before I have anything else. And it's only, I didn't have any Noni juice for about 2 weeks. I like to take supplements away foods away that I've been consuming, and then reintroduce them to see what benefits I have. So I'll be like feeling great, but then I'll run out of something. And then I say, okay, that's cool. I'm out of it. Let's see how I do without it. So that happened with this juice. And it it was a marked difference for me. I have 2 kids and I don't get very much sleep. And their dad was gone on a movie shoot for 4 weeks. And so everything was on me to do. I was like the sole support, emotional, mental, driving, cooking, cleaning. It was just overwhelming. And I have had this juice to support me throughout this, but this time I did not for the second week. And that second week, let me tell you that uh, not being able to go to my fridge and just take that swig of Noni juice, I just tried to push it out of my mind, because I don't like when I have something that I like and it's my ritual and I just decide that it's good for me. I don't like when I don't have it. But not having the luxury of Noni juice and not having time to order it, I was just like, come on, grow up. You can do life without, your Noni juice for a little bit. I tried the first things that happened is that I noticed when I don't sleep or get stressed out, I will have a thyroid goiter start to like feel enlarged. I have a goiter and it kind of stays small, and no one wants to do any surgery on it because it's not really, my thyroid levels are fine, like everything's fine on paper. But I noticed that it's almost like this this voice that tells me, you need sleep, you need to rest, calm the fuck down. um,
Mm.
so and I hadn't been sleeping, but I'd felt like I could kind of just do life. But after not having the Noni juice for about like 5 days, I started to feel it when I didn't sleep. I started to feel this the sluggishness, the daytime sleepiness, the mood changes that come when my thyroid gets out of balance. Um,
Oh, well.
and I looked at everything else that I was taking, because I was still taking my turmeric, and I was still taking my holy basil that I take for stress, and those things still support me. Like I still was able to take those and feel like I was doing something good as far as like, general inflammation is concerned. But when I got my Noni juice back, And I had, like I told you earlier before we started the video, I've got cats in heat, kids with nightmares, a new puppy that has to be let out to pee. It has been a week of not getting a lot of sleep, honestly. But I feel fine once I drink some of this. And honestly, and this is me not trying to sell the product to people. Like, I don't know if that's a good thing, because in some ways I'm like, shouldn't I feel tired so that I feel what I'm kind of doing that's not healthy and have to correct it? Um, but what is interesting to me is that, like, I'll correct it when I can. I'm one of these people that will make up for times in my life where I need more sleep or I need to rest. I'm a spa girl and I'm gonna get my rest. So I am so grateful that I have this stuff right now, that I can get through just talking to you. Honestly,
Mhm.
would not be possible without that. It would be possible, but I would feel like ass and I wouldn't look cute and I wouldn't be able to think as clearly. It's just almost like an immediate, like, wake up, and it feels I don't lose my appetite. I don't feel like, like I did keto. I took ketones for a while, and that was like crack, to my system. I don't feel any weird side effects from this if I take too much. Or I don't know what too
Mm.
much is, because you're telling me it's a food. And, this study has shown that these runners took 8 ounces. I'm like, 8 ounces? I could take 8 ounces.
Well, one good way I think one of the best rational ways to determine like how much you take is to watch the potassium level of noni. There's some misperceptions out there promoted by some of the medical based websites that say noni is dangerously high in potassium.
Oh,
I'm not
yeah.
really sure what they're doing to get that out of noni. There's one incident that occurred around 2007 where someone reported that so much potassium in noni they that it caused them a kidney issue. Um, the media jumped on this,
Right.
and
I've seen.
apparently, when they do their summary overviews, they grab whatever might have happened. So they give this warning out based on one incident that was found to be a non correlated cause. But the truth is, there's about 50 milligrams of potassium in 1 ounce,
Okay.
maybe up to 50 to 90, depending on which system you use to analyze it. But prune juice has 90 milligrams per ounce. A baked potato is 900 milligrams per potato.
Okay.
Spinach, two-thirds a cup of spinach is 250 milligrams of potassium.
Okay.
And if you're using potassium is like, well, how much potassium? If you can answer the question, how much potassium do I need? Then you can use that to determine, well, how much noni is enough
Okay.
noni. That's one way to determine your servings per day. You know, there's another more substantial study that was done at the University of Hawaii, and it found that the nutrients, some of the active, what are considered potentially useful, valuable nutrients in noni,
Mhm.
they remain in your bloodstream for up to 8 hours
Mhm.
before they begin to diminish. So you could say when you have a serving of noni, it's it's it takes eight
Yep.
hours to digest, to
Okay.
process through your body. But another thing is to think about, when one thing scary about finding a new food, you think, well, I don't want to be dependent on something.
Right. Yeah.
I don't want now I have to have noni every day. But think about
That's
orange
honestly
juice.
how I feel.
Well, you think about orange juice. We have 4 ounces of orange juice, 8 ounces of milk used to be the standard of what you'd have for breakfast. But oranges present an amount of a vitamin C that is very valuable to your overall general health and well-being. So you have it as a staple. Noni fits into a category of potentially a staple. It has an array of 160 nutrients. It's a first earth food, meaning that it hasn't been augmented by agricultural
Right.
design.
Right. Hasn't been created
So
like
the
broccoli.
reason our fruits and vegetables are so full of starch and sugar is through agricultural design. Foods more reflected what is in Noni 2, 3, 4,000 years ago, maybe even 15, 20,000 years ago, in that they were not selected for high sugar content. And that's just changed the way that our consumption habits have gone, to the point where we're fully glucogenically fueled in our diet. We consume sugar 3 meals a day.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
really interesting as a parent watching my kids just like, unless they're eating meat, you know, it's, I'm seeing, I'm like, it's just going to become sugar. Like, oh, you want pasta? It's just going to become sugar. Oh, it's in everything. But brings me to another point, because like, there's a part of me that's like, well, maybe, um, a marker of how much you should have is how much you can stand, because the average person's palate will be repulsed by the taste of reishi. The average person's palate will be repulsed by the taste of noni juice. Um,
I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know about that, because there's been a lot of negative presentation, I think, delivered from companies that are not working with 100% pure noni.
okay.
Sometimes people have called me and said, "Why is your noni watered down?" It's not
Oh,
watered down. Well, yeah, but I can see into the bottle. It's transparent. It doesn't have such a
it
strong
is.
taste. And when they talk to other companies, they tell them, well, that's because Hawaii doesn't make real noni juice. Well, the thing they don't tell them is that those other companies trademarked the term real noni, and they're making Kool-Aid from concentrates.
Oh my gosh. There you go. And they fill it with syrups. Like the last time I think I went to like Sprouts because I didn't want to order it.
Mhm.
I'm like, I bet they have it at Sprouts. And so I bought theirs and it looked very authentic, whatever bottle it was. Maybe it was like Tahitian, I don't know. But and I was like, this is disgusting. What was disgusting were was the sweetness, because then I looked at the bottle and they'd added a bunch of juices to it. And I'm like, I like this. I don't mind the taste now. But it is
It's
interesting.
more of like, tell me if you agree. It's more of like, if you take coffee and chocolate, like raw cacao, if you've had those
Mm.
and you realize that coffee and chocolate are some of the most biggest businesses, and there's a Starbucks in every corner, you you have to have a scale for bitterness, because being low in sugar and actually being of the coffee family, the tree itself
Really
does have, yeah,
interesting.
there's a split somewhere down like 60,000 years ago or something like that, or even
Okay.
further, where noni and coffee separated. But it has an authentic, robust bitterness. And you know what's funny is that in our culture, bitter is somehow mean spirited or awful. You say,
Uh-huh.
I know a bitter person, bitter spirited person, and they're awful.
Yeah.
But in French, the word is amer, which actually, if you said, I know someone who's very amer, you'd think they were glorious and fantastic. It's a stronger appreciation for the spectrum of taste that
Oh,
we
interesting.
have in our foods. You have a spring leafy salad, you're going to have some arugula in there, you're going to have some dandelion greens, you're going to have a bitter salad, and you're going to use your dressings to tone it in a direction that's more palatable. We found a way to work with bitter foods. Noni has an authentic bitterness, but it also has a somewhat of a sweetness to it. And it has a good amount of vitamin C, so it does have a tartness. We
Yeah.
don't often, it's like when you hold one of those coils where hot, cold, and for the first time, and you feel like you just got burnt at the science fair, wherever.
Yeah.
Noni kind of does that on the first taste. Also, because it is a matured juice, like a vinegar, a kombucha, or kefir, it does have that sense of being aged.
Yes, it does taste a
And
little bit.
when you don't understand that the first time, and other people have told you all these negative things about, you're gonna hate it, you go, whoa, something's wrong here. Or
That's
if you didn't know it was matured, because these companies that we're in competition with, they don't have a need to teach that or educate people about that, because they're adding sugar, or they're
right.
adding grape juice concentrate, which is sugar, to sweeten it up. They don't have to even discuss that. about the maturation, because they're just shaking the tree and they're crushing the fruit, turning it into a puree, and it hasn't gone through the maturation process. So they're just skipping that step.
The maturation process, is that how long the fruit is on the tree before it's
No, we sun ripen our fruit. Some
okay?
in traditionally we sun ripen our fruit. They lay it on a table and it attracts a bunch of bugs and stuff. We let it sun ripen on the tree. We pick it when it's ripe, when it turns yellow or white. And then it immediately begins to break itself down. So within 2 to 3 days, like I said earlier, you could squeeze it through your fingers into a mush. Within 3 to 5 weeks, by itself, we just put it in a container and seal it. It turns into juice all by itself through its own enzymatic forces.
Oh, that's
Then
interesting.
we drain it through gravity. When people order raw noni, I don't know if you've done that yet. It's
Oh yeah,
sparkling and effervescent.
that was my next question because I have been getting the raw, and it's interesting that I have a different feeling about the raw versus the pasteurized, but not very much, to the point where I can't sit here and say, oh, I prefer this over this. This is stronger. Um, the raw taste might be a little bit more intense. Um, I'll let you speak on that because to be honest with you, I'm not someone who feels a huge difference in how I feel. I would think that something that is raw, organic and raw and non-heated, non-pasteurized is going to be stronger. But I also read, and you can tell me if this is accurate,
Right.
that it doesn't make a difference too much with the noni juice. And that's
The
another,
studies haven't been done,
okay.
but it is interesting because I've been answering this question quite a bit and thinking about it quite a bit. And I'm grateful that you said that you didn't really feel an energetic difference between the two, because it's important what an individual feels when
Yeah,
they try one or the other. Uh, the raw juice likely has a little bit more of a nutritional density to it because there are some volatile nutrients in noni.
right.
Scopolamine being one of them that is known for antibacterial, antifungal, antiparasitic qualities. Even
Mhm.
some anti-cancer studies have been done with scopolamine. I don't know if I pronounce it right yet, but that's how it's spelled.
All right.
And and the and so with uh with that, uh if you look at the testimonials, it's all pasteurized noni. If you
Mhm.
look at the science that's been done, it's typically all pasteurized noni or even powder that they've used in the studies. So
Hmm.
that contrast hasn't been defined scientifically. We can use our rational minds and say, okay, well, here's what we see, here's what we perceive, here's what we know, and try and draw some kind of logic out of it. Uh, One thing that I thought was interesting in terms of raw food, because that becomes a question too, because there was a pretty good, strong raw food movement in the beginning of the millennium I mean,
Hogenets, Wander planets.
they would say cooked food is poison, you know.
Yeah.
I was listening to Joel Furman talk about his book Super Immunity,
Mm.
and in there he said there's in green leafy vegetables, there in the cellular wall and in the nucleus, there are these compounds that if you put it in the blender and mix it, it gives you like a 35% less likelihood of getting prostate or cervical cancers.
Mm.
And I was like, And then he says you can cook with it. So let's say you take your greens, put it in the blender, blend it up, and then put that in your sauces and stuff. You're actually adding this new compound that was created by these two enzymes.
That because of how they were like mixed
And
and
you can't make it by chewing it because by then your saliva have broken down the enzymes.
oh, interesting. But cooking it
So,
doesn't break down those enzymes.
right. And I was like, why? And then immediately, as if he was listening to my mind, it was when I was at the Integrative Institute or the Institute for Integrative Nutrition getting a health coaching certificate. We watched all these videos of all these guys do lectures,
Mhm.
and he says because compounds have a higher heat threshold than enzymes,
Don't have a higher heat
that
threshold.
breaks the concept of cooked food is poison. Instead of asking, are we cooking our food? We should ask, what point are we burning our food?
Ooh, interesting. Yes. And it makes me also
So
think about like, sorry to interrupt you, but like, let's say
Mhm.
in French cuisine, for example, all of the sauces that they make. I mean, not just French, but it just for some reason my mind went there. And I'm like, and these are places where they have, high fat diets and a lot of creams and a lot of just things that we think of, oh, that's high cholesterol. And, but they'll have lower levels overall of cancer. Um, and it might have something to do with how they cook and how intricate it is,
Yes.
preserves some of these compounds. Just a thought.
Hmm. Yeah. And so, well, I think about that and I was like, because, well, maybe that's something to do with how pasteurized noni keeps on having similar
Benefits. Yeah.
expectations of use.
Yeah.
And because if it is matured, then you have a lot of these compounds, all the enzymes have been matured. They're going to have a higher heat threshold, which pasteurization temperature is only 165 to 185. It's not like boiling temperature. So that could speak to that to some degree.
So are there any dangers to have, because that's actually the reason why I'm like, I don't notice a huge difference. Maybe I'll just do the pasteurized because I'm still feeling the benefits of the pasteurized. Is there any danger to, I mean, the raw noni juice, if there being little critters in it or like,
It's antibacterial, antifungal, antiparasitic, antiseptic,
Oh,
and potentially antiviral.
oh,
So it's like, would you say the same thing about a vinegar? Would you say the same thing about a wine? When you say matured, that means that it's self-preserved in its
oh,
own natural status, in its own natural state. So it's not likely that you would have a problem with that.
okay. Interesting. So
Mm.
when you guys sell both versions of it, I noticed there isn't like a spiel or description, promoting the benefits of one over the other. You're just giving consumers a choice.
Yeah, yeah. And what I've gotten some really incredible testimonials over the years from people who've used Noni for various different uh, reasons.
Mhm.
I've never said, well, you've been better off doing it this way or that way, because when someone gives you a great testimonial with pasteurized juice, it's kind of surprising and pretty amazing. And you just want to respect that. You
Yeah.
don't think, oh, what would have happened if you had raw? Um, but I have had people who have stood completely and said, I like the raw better, or people say I'm good with the pasteurized both ways. I'd rather have people tell me how it's working for them. And and then I'm just happy that we can offer both and we can offer authentic noni fresh from the farm.
I wanted you to, I know you don't want to talk about benefits in the same, like, trite way that the FDA kind of forces people to think of things as beneficial in this way, this way, this way. But when it comes to what we consider to be the benefits, or like you have termed more accurately, the expectations of use, um, I feel more energy. I'm able to power through days when I haven't had a lot of sleep. My overall inflammation goes down. Um, I have felt more energized, like, after I get, like, I had a really bad respiratory infection a few months ago. And I definitely, after something like this, I used to be an asthmatic and I would cough for a long time. Even when the virus was gone, I would just kind of keep coughing. And it stinks because I was getting back into like a lot of cardio. I noticed this time, I'm like, oh, I mean, I'm just over it. Like it's gone. I didn't get my asthma. Like I didn't get all of these other
Oh,
things that
wow.
kind of, a cold will kind of sometimes trigger a bunch of other things. And this time it just didn't happen. And I also noticed a couple of times starting to get something. I'm starting to get sick, which kids in daycare, you're always getting sick. I don't really get sick that much. I start to feel a little bit off, especially after not getting a lot of rest. That's when your immune system goes down. I take some swigs of this, and when even in the middle of the day, when I kind of feel that I'm not feeling great, take some swigs of it, and I I forget about it. I forget that I was even compromised slightly. So those are, I mean, there's a lot of, I think, expectations of use in a physical manner, and I'll let you speak on that. But then I want to segue to some more spiritual aspects of this that I don't really know much about. I just want to hear you speak on it because I have a feeling that you might have some thoughts or ideas that you can share. So,
I think the way I like to look at this is to ask a question. When was the last time our nutritional essential list of nutrients was updated? And when was it formulated? It was updated it was updated last when it was formulated, as far as I understand, in the 1940s to the 1950s
ooh.
with Kellogg's
Oh,
to
great.
promote breakfast cereal.
Corn-fed country. Yeah.
And I don't know if I don't know if it's conspiracy. I don't know if it's, I have to look more into this, but it's something that I think I read, that they tried to make vitamin C a pharmaceutical drug that you'd have to go get a prescription to get.
Okay.
But they found it so much in food, they decided they had to create some kind of a list of accepted nutrients that are not drugs.
Yeah.
They created the list of essential nutrients. And isn't it interesting that hasn't been updated since?
Right. I mean, we
We
were
haven't
life
learned
expectancy.
anything new
Right.
since.
Yeah.
Nothing is qualified as a nutrient that would effectively bring our expectation of general health up.
You're right. Doesn't make any sense.
Anything that has risen to the level of maybe being qualified as that has either been called an antioxidant or on a general term, or discarded as someone trying to sell you on something. They figured that if you have the list of essential nutrients, as long as you're getting those nutrients, you're getting everything else too that you need, because they're in those foods. But when Ralph Henneke, I think his name is, he was one of the people working for Dole. He was studying pineapples, and he found a novel compound he named zeronine, and he suggested that this has the properties that could be equivalent to the standard that we've set for what we call a vitamin
Okay.
or an essential nutrient. And they wanted nothing to do with him
Oh, interesting.
in his
So you think
logic.
this could be really important for everybody, and this could actually support us to the point where we can expect greater health if we continually receive this, or is that what he was
Yeah,
saying?
exactly.
And
Then he found it in greater quantities in noni, and that began his fascination with noni.
oh,
And then no one would listen to him, so he started talking to what became the Tahitian Noni Company, and they proprietized all of his research and funded him to go further in it. So that's how the industry started in around 1996.
wow.
But
Okay.
when we think about that, and we understand, I don't know if you know this, but antioxidants, the entire coin of the word antioxidant, has become obsolete. If you look at the ORAC values in cinnamon or cloves or just the general seasonings, it's so high that it makes any food, pomegranate juice, any food that's claiming that it's got an antioxidant value, laughable.
Oh, interesting.
Just use seasonings.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just go look at the list. It'll blow your mind how high oregano is compared to pomegranate juice. It's like the earth versus the moon.
Mm.
It's
They
it's
want us,
it's
they
it's
want us to buy that juice.
well, and the guy that was working on the ORAC value research, he passed away before he was able to figure out exactly how much you actually need to offset the oxidation in your body. They never answered that question before it started becoming
Antioxidants.
antioxidants. They
So
never figured out. Yeah.
So it could be the case that we don't actually really need that many anyways.
We have to offset oxidation, but they haven't even told you how much oxidation there is, let alone how much you need to offset it. It
Mm,
was never finished. That's why the FDA has completely discarded that entire part of their. I don't even think you can find it on their website anymore.
wow. But
But
not
that
before
said,
every company.
an interesting thing about Noni in the FDA in terms of like people ask, is the FDA approved it? It's not a drug. It doesn't need approval.
Mm,
What they do with food is they make a statement saying such as Noni has been found generally acceptable as a food, non-harmful to the human body.
okay.
That's what they found. That's all they have to find. There isn't uh, approved by the FDA. That's for drugs. The Noni isn't a drug. And then supplementation is a supplement or a food is up to the seller.
Okay.
And that's when you have to deal with the words of the disclaimers, not approved, not these statements have not been reviewed by the FDA, that kind of stuff for supplements, because they want to create a very distinct line between what is a drug and
Mhm.
what is a food. And supplements are in this gray area.
Not know that.
Typically, a supplement is a concentration. So vitamin C is a supplement. It's been extracted from a food, and then you get a little pill. It's an extracted, and
So
it's a.
powdered noni. Maybe could we consider that a?
Typically, that would be a. It would be a food. It should be marketed as a food because
Can
it's
you
just a
tell me about
powdered
that?
food.
Can you tell me about powdered noni? Because I am curious about it. For example, I'm going on a road trip tomorrow. I'll be on the road for like 4 days, and I'm like, well, I'll get a cooler bag, and I'm going to put my noni juice in the cooler. But I sure wish I had like powdered noni. If it
Now,
works and how it works, I'm curious.
I've had plenty of customers that use the powder, specifically for travel, but also because they didn't initially like the taste of noni. It is, I would say, more like a raisin versus a red wine because
Uh,
it hasn't gone through the maturation process.
okay.
The whole fruit is used, including the seed.
Oh,
It's
in the
slow.
powder. Okay.
It's vacuum heat process
Okay.
to be turned into a whole fruit powder. It's like any other whole fruit powder where it isn't water soluble.
Mhm.
A note on that: if you have a powder that's water soluble, it's only flavoring. It's only the sugar that can survive the spray drying process. All the nutrients get flushed down the drain. So
Oh,
if it dissolves in water, it's likely low in nutrients unless they added electrolytes.
okay. Interesting.
So if you get a whole fruit powder, you want it to be like dirt.
Yeah.
Noni doesn't have much flavor. Right. Have you ever had what is his name? Sam Harris. He created the ultimate meal out in Santa Barbara. If you ever had the ultimate meal, it's like this green, it's like got 25 superfood nutrients that are all freeze dried powders.
Okay. I've never
It's
had
like dirt.
that. Okay. Because it's not water soluble.
Right.
And so
You
you're
want to
saying
use it
that
in a smoothie. Yeah.
I saw some YouTube video where they were talking about benefits of noni juice. And he mentioned that the whole, like the leaves could be used and the stem and like, is that true? And what would we
In
want that?
the
How it's in the powder?
it hasn't been studied. The
Oh,
powder includes the whole fruit, not the leaf,
not the leaves.
not any part of the tree, but the whole tree, just like any other culture
Mhm.
with a uh, with an important plant, they use the entire thing. Like the indigenous indigenous
Indigenous.
Americans use the entire buffalo.
Yeah. They revere it.
They
They revere all of it.
right. So uh, anthropologically speaking, through anecdotal stories, the entire tree has had uses. The
Okay.
root of the tree, perhaps used for dyes, pigments, red pigments. The leaves for wounds and things like that, and teas,
Okay.
and the fruit just as a staple food, and 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 in its juice form as a tonic. And then the bark of the tree was said to have been scraped to use for a more uh, natural labor. They didn't go into why. There's been no studies, but they said that it helped with inducing or with comforting or helping with labor in pregnancy. Now, if you go to the WebMD and Healthline and some of these websites, they have skewed that information as to say Noni was used by Polynesians
To
to
cause.
cause abortions. If
Okay.
it wasn't the juice,
Mm.
it was the bark of the tree, and it wasn't to cause an abortion. And I think it's a little bit, I don't know, over the line to suggest an entire culture was having abortions in the first place.
Sure.
It's just weird
Yeah.
logic, and it's not scientific logic. And that's with negatives. They don't have to have a a foundation in science. It's more this was said and we're reporting it. It's a
Right.
summary analysis.
Right.
So they have to be more firm with their positives than they do with their negatives. They have a completely different set of rules. But think about it. If we had a juice you could drink and not get pregnant, it would be, Noni Jaeger bombs.
It's
It,
true. I
it's
mean,
it's just not it's just
it's
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 just
not
not
grounded in
logical.
logic. Yeah, it's not grounded in
Yeah.
logic at all, which makes you kind of wonder what the other motivations might be for something like that. Um, Now, I do want to talk about any kind of spiritual implications of this juice, and what your thoughts are about it as a like a conduit for energy. Because as an energy healer, I'm one of these people that doesn't do energy work when I am fatigued, when I need energy myself. I will cancel a client before I, you know, put them before myself, because I've seen the, you know, negative side effects that come from that. But what I have noticed is that it allows me to move into vibrational realms and shift vibrationally and energetically so much faster. Um, Now, I tend to, when I'm about to do an energy healing session for someone, or a meditation myself, where I have an end goal in mind, so I kind of have to be like very, I want to say, easily, like it's like spiritually, I need to be able to shift quickly, right? I don't have so much time. Sorry, my dogs are fighting. I don't have so much time to meditate before I do a session, right? I'll get my room ready. I'll do a bunch of stuff that I need to do. I'll have client intake forms, and it's a little bit of a mechanical approach before I begin a healing session. Um, and I always set aside time, about 20 minutes, to get centered, to call in protection and do all this sort of stuff. And I've noticed sometimes where I haven't had time to do that. And it has I usually feel some guilt feelings, and I feel like, gosh, I'm a naughty, I'm a naughty healer because I'm not doing what I know to be the most in integrity. So this healing session will probably not be my very best. And maybe at the end of it, I will invite them to come in again, or I'll do a lot of follow-ups or something, make up for it in some way. Um, and that's usually when my energy is low. I start to feel like that before a session. Um, but taking some noni juice and water, I still drink coffee, so I will mix my noni and coffee. I've never had a problem with that, by the way, having my coffee and then being like, noni, a little more coffee. Never had a problem. I thought about it, and I'm like thinking about the mixing in my stomach and how gross that would be, but it's been fine. So anyway, but moving on into this, it's been interesting to me how quickly I've been able to um, raise my vibration, shift into gear, spiritually speaking, so that I can be a proper channel for very, very high energies. I have been able to do this quicker with the noni juice, which is like, I don't know where to place that. I haven't been able to have a conversation with anybody about it. It's one of these things where it's so subjective that it makes you think maybe it's all in my head. But if I were to have a conversation with someone about a supplement and any kind of spiritual benefits to that supplement, I think it would probably be you. So
Uh,
I wanted to know if you could speak on that at all. And this is really kind of more for me personally, I think at this point than anyone else I can think of. But
oh wow. Well, I I have a I think when it comes to spirituality, it's so intersubjective
yeah,
and imagine it. It engages our imagination and our intuition,
yeah,
and it lights us up in our mind to consider. You mentioned Kundalini earlier, and so you've clearly thought about Kundalini and how do we unlock our inner potentials and what are they and how do they apply to our lives? When we think about food and how that might affect us. I don't know if you've experienced fasting and things like that, where you're trying to cleanse your body so that you can resonate with uh, these higher frequencies or your higher potentialities to allow whatever that is, the cosmic forces that are around that we're immersed in from
yeah.
all the stars and the galactic concordance and all these things are coming into this planet and have to somehow also move through this planet.
Mhm.
The plants were the first to get here.
Yeah.
Those roadways, those pathways, I look at the plants and I think they're expressions, fractal expressions of that energy finding its way off of the planet.
Yeah.
And so when you look at noni
Mhm.
as a first earth food, you might even say this is a fruit from the Garden of Eden, even. It has not been augmented by knowledge, by the design of man. And there are a lot of others. A lot of these foods that fall into this category are considered adaptogenic, meaning you consume them and somehow they bring you into balance.
Mhm.
But what is that balance? And that's what I think might be interesting to look at with noni and other adaptogenic first earth foods. Is these are like, if you're going to have a conspiracy, go big. Don't end with some lizard person, end with
Yeah.
something that is intangible and beyond comprehension. Look at a tree and think, where is that coming from?
Is that from?
I mean, it is expressing the universe through its leaves and its fruits.
Now you mentioned the
And
root.
go ahead.
You mentioned the roots of the noni tree were red. I think you said that earlier when you were talking about the bark and stuff, and that's interesting too because I noticed that the plants will speak to us like what they do. Like you look at a walnut, they're good for your brain, looks like a brain. So I kind of wonder if there's any connection to the red roots and the kundalini, that energy, that kind of feeling that you have of grounded, resonance with the divine, because it's not something that pushes you to get things done that are out of alignment with what you are here for. It's something that aligns you and balances you. So maybe it balances you in that particular way. I don't know.
I think that there's something to that. It does help uh, create there have been finding that it helps increase serotonin levels, that it helps to bring a calmness, that it helps to settle your nerves and things of that sort too, while also being antioxidant, or not antioxidant, but anti-inflammatory,
Mhm.
analgesic, lowering,
And-
hiring or improving your threshold for pain
mhm.
in regard to inflammation or arthritic type of conditions, muscle type of healing. Um, they've been giving it to equine, to horses,
Hmm.
race horses, to help them in their healing process.
Recover.
Uh, they found it working really well with animals, dogs, for instance. People will say my dog was sick. I gave him noni and it was running around like a little puppy.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, and you don't have
cows.
to, sorry, get excited.
I had a dairy farm with one of the universities, use it and say they were getting great results with their dairy cows. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. I thought of something because I gave some to my husband to like he was getting sick. He just said, I feel like I'm getting your cold that you had. And I was like, well, have some noni. It'll just wipe it out because it wiped mine out. And in the back of my head, I was thinking maybe this isn't going to work because he hasn't been drinking
Mhm.
noni. It's not like it's been in his system. And a lot of supplements, a lot of supplements take like a couple of months to kind of really you notice the effects of them. I mean, that day he was better by the end of the day, no mention of getting, you know what I mean? He forgot about it. And and I sort of feel like, well, yeah, I mean, it's something that I don't think you have to have been taking and have been on it for a long time in order to really immediately notice the effects of it. But I also feel like, I guess we can break it down into, okay, it's what they call antioxidants, or it's and whatever that pain, reducing effect,
Analgesic, yeah.
anti-inflammatory. It could be all serotonin. I guess it could be all these things, but bottom line is you just really feel good afterwards. And I'm more interested in like lining up with my, I guess divine blueprint is sort of what I like to think of it as. Like, what is the highest potential for my body? Um, and I think we should seek foods that can bring that to us. And it's going to be an individual thing, because it depends on so many factors. But I also, touching on what you were saying before about these plants and their expression, their being an expression of the divine. I do think it's interesting when you look at the fruit and how it has been, it's been called vomit fruit because people like smell it. I remember I smelled it once when I was in Brazil, um, and it didn't smell good. But I wonder if
That's when there's sun ripening it on the tables.
okay,
It's any fruit. If you set it out and let it rot, is gonna
gonna
have a
start to stink.
stench, and that's the misperception that I get so frustrated about. It's like it doesn't smell like that off the tree
So it's
when you
not
pick it.
it's not when
It's because, yeah. Go ahead.
it
Sorry.
falls from the tree and kind of starts to kind of rot on the ground, and then it'll start to smell, right?
When bacteria and insects drop their enzymes on it and things like that, it starts to create a stew, just like any other. Yeah,
But the fruit itself, are there any other names for noni fruit?
there are a few. I think that the vomit fruit thing and the cheese fruit
Oh,
thing,
cheese fruit.
one for taste, yeah, one for taste and one for the smell, is I think that's propaganda from other companies that don't want people drinking 100% pure noni juice, because if you do it correctly, it doesn't. If you smell that, it has more floral, right? If you take a smell of your noni right there, it
Yeah,
doesn't have more of a floral type of, it has an authentic kind of floral
yeah,
scent. And honestly, if you get off the plane in Hawaii, that's what Hawaii smells like.
it's true. And it smells, it does smell a little like sunscreen coconuts, and it does have a little bit of
Yeah.
that fermented smell it smells way better than like kombucha. When you smell
And
kombucha,
if you're, and it, yeah, right. And if you're in Hawaii and you walk past and you start smelling after a rain, it's the breadfruit that fell from the trees and is rotting off and it's a pungent, like, whoa, what's going on over there? Like an animal died or something.
so where does this
Not
grow? Like,
noni.
can noni grow in California? Is there any hope for me?
Maybe, maybe. It's growing, like I said, it grows in the Florida Keys. I know that, in lower end of Florida.
Uh-huh.
Um, it, it needs a lot. I think it requires a lot of water.
Uh,
It can endure a lot of water. If you've ever been in a tropical area, like the wet side of the Big Island, Hawaii, if it's raining and you're going to go outside and count to one, you might as well have jumped in a lake.
right.
And it'll rain like that for 5 hours, take a break, and rain for 5 more hours, and do that for 7, 8, 10 days in a row.
So
So the tropical plants can endure that,
okay,
and in a way require that. You're not going to get that in California.
right.
it's more like a drought. So the tree isn't going to be that happy there.
And our soil, our soil isn't the best too. So I wonder
Right.
if
And the soil in Hawaii and in the tropical zones is more of an authentic, um, true soil, more lava enriched soils.
yeah.
Hasn't been depleted by over rotation and pesticides and herbicides and all kinds of things that are done in our modern farming.
If you were to if you were to get your hands on some noni fruit, like what method would you use to try to like make your own juice at home?
So it's really simple. You make sure you get ripe noni fruit. You'll see a lot of pictures on sites where they have green, yellow, and white fruit. You want to stay away from the green.
Yeah.
Not because it's bad, it just isn't ripe. It still has a good amount of starches in it, and it doesn't break down. And it will make your juice more putrid
Okay.
and give you that taste that they say vomit fruit.
Okay.
It'll give you a more pungent and sour kind of taste.
Yeah.
Yellow and white fruit, and then you simply put it in a bucket and put a seal on it and leave it with a little area for gases to escape, because every maturation goes through a champagne phase.
Huh.
And within 3 to 5 weeks, you have noni fruit juice.
Can you put like a bunch of them in there or in one or
Yeah, that's what you would do. You would fill the whole bucket and then seal it and leave the lid a little bit loose so that gases can escape. And within 3 to 5 weeks, you'll have
that's
noni juice.
so do you put holes
That's
or is it something like or cheesecloth
if
like
you loosen if you loosen a lid just enough to
oh,
where pressure would release the gas,
oh, I see.
that's good
Okay.
enough. Or
Okay.
if you were lucky to have a pressure release valve too, that work. That's how our tanks have those.
It doesn't like
But
attract.
in other words, that's exactly what you would get from us. So if you had a tree in your backyard and you did that, that's exactly what you would get from us. I like to call our company your backyard for noni juice, because
Yeah.
you're getting exactly what you would get if you made it yourself. And in a traditional sense, they would put it in jars and set it on the windowsill and let it sun do its job, and then they would just drink out of those jars,
Oh, interesting.
is what we're told. So it's just a very basic, simple process. There
Yeah.
isn't any formula or method, and you'll get a different taste nearly every batch. You'll get a little bit of sometimes it'll be really highly sparkled, sometimes it'll have a low sparkle. Of course, after pasteurization, the sparkle is gone and it's more inert. Um, and sometimes it'll be clear. If it's rained a lot, you'll get more of a clear, watery like juice. And then if it's been a drought, it'll be darker and more. It'll just have uh, a stronger flavor.
So is there a difference
But the
between the more
studies,
white noni and the
this,
yellow fruit or not really?
no, no, not really. It's just a different phase of the ripening process.
Okay.
As it ages, it gets more white.
Okay. But don't we want that?
Mhm.
We want like more.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna age out in the tank. So
Oh, I
so long
see.
as you're picking it once it's yellow,
Once it's yellow, at
because
least.
the yellow fruit can fall off the tree.
Cool. I mean, I don't have any access to noni fruit. I don't know anybody in LA. There might be like a
Mhm.
couple of exotic grocery stores. Um, but no,
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
unlikely you're gonna find it on the shelf because it ripens so quickly. It
okay.
just doesn't have a shelf stability, the fruit itself.
Right. And we don't want it to.
I only sent it once, and that was to the Dr. Oz show. I
Oh,
put it in on dry ice and sent it. And if you saw that episode where
I
he was
did.
talking to Chris Hunter, the medicine hunter, and he reached into that box, that's the box I sent him. And when he
Oh,
opened it, steam came out because it was on dry ice.
oh,
And
fun.
that fruit came directly from our farm that he pulled
Oh,
out of that box.
oh, wow. Is your farm
Yeah.
something that people can visit if they're like,
At this time, we don't have tours.
okay.
We're not, I mean, but if you happen to find yourself on the big island of Hawaii and you go to see the lava flows and you go across the 86 lava flow,
Hmm.
at the beginning of that, there's a noni farm on the right toward the ocean. That's the lava, that's the orchard, one of our ancient groves that we call lava land. I planted when I first got to Hawaii. That's where I was in 2003. We were planting the trees right into the lava rock,
Oh, wow.
and you wouldn't even know that now because so much we've added so much mulch and stuff that you would think that's just farmland.
Hmm.
But I was
It,
running up
grow-
and down the lava, huh?
it grows it grew in lava rock.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
It's mineral
And then
rich.
on the other, yeah, yep. I mean, they pulverize lava rock and use it as fertilizers all over the place. So you just have a huge bed of lava,
Yeah.
and we
Cool.
just planted the trees right into it. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Do you take Noni juice? Is it part of your like, is it
Yeah,
part
I've
of
been
your
doing,
diet?
I don't have any with me right now because I'm on a little unexpected trip, but I typically play a little drinking game. When I get a good testimonial or someone asks me what noni tastes like, I take a sip.
Oh,
That way, when I explain the taste, I'm like right there with it. I'm not
yeah.
just,
A very, very close friend of mine is he has a cyst, in her hip from, I think that's kind of a side effect of some osteoarthritis, and she's got inflammation, and but they told her to walk, so it's just like, ouch, but okay. And I'm like,
mhm.
I feel like this is something that could help her. And um my family members, and it's just something that I feel like everybody that I know, I just want them to, understand its the impact that it could have on their health. But I know that there is a lot of misinformation out there, and kind of watered down information, even if it is well intended. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to make this video, is because I wasn't finding anything that really satisfied me, and all of this information that you're giving us about, everything from the FDA and their, you know, when they constructed our nutritional standards. I don't know exactly what it's called, but I mean, it's so crooked, but it is time that people understood what it is that they uh, are agreeing to when we allow these standards to, control what we decide is good for us and how much of it and when. And I wish there was a new a new standard that we could create. Um, but everybody has different needs, and it also makes me wonder about this.
Yeah, I don't know if I call it a new, I don't mean, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't know if we should call it a new standard, but
Okay.
a greater orientation
Yes.
and foundation to our understanding. Sometimes we're oversimplifying what is already simple but complex. And we should realize that we're intelligent enough to look at something and see what it is and count it what we find. And
Mhm.
maybe it's bigger than what we currently have modeled it to be. And
Yeah.
we've oversimplified it just because, for whatever reason. And I think we should embrace the complexity.
Mhm.
And I mean, if someone can know every member of a football team and the name of every national football team, they can know the name of every nutrient that's available in a food too. It can be complex and we can understand it. We don't need to reduce it down to a list of 12
Right.
or whatever it is. It could be a list of 108 or more, and we could understand how that balances out. And we could teach that in school. I mean, we could come out of high school knowing exactly how to feed ourselves for our highest potential and how to enjoy that food, how to prepare it, or how to not lose out. A lot of the times people don't want to be healthy because they don't want to miss out on the joy of eating, and nobody does. So
Right. I think one of the things about this was that I did feel like when I first started taking it that I needed to, like they were instructing, abstain from eating before and after, all these rules around it. Whereas one amazing thing you were describing earlier, that we can touch on again, if there's anything you wanted to add, was that you could add this to food. You can add it to drinks. This does not have to be something that you take only in the morning on an empty stomach. It can be something that can integrate into your life, because this was a part of people's lives. It is a part of people's lives, but it was something that was so integral to their daily life. And I think another thing about, supplementation versus looking at things as food is that it sets them apart. It makes them something that we have to, I know what, because I'm traveling, it's like I've got to find a little place for my tinctures and my my pills and my supplements. And we have our Monday through Friday, pill boxes. And it kind of divorces us from the what I feel like should be like the birthright that we are given when we have these amazing plants and fruits and mushrooms. And it's too bad that we have decided that, oh, it's not. And that's one of the reasons I wanted people to know, like, this is not hard to make. It's just something that maybe in where you live it's not accessible, and so or you don't have the time. I mean, I have no time to ferment anything
Well,
right now.
I think that noni is an old food that's been missing.
Yeah.
And an example of this is once upon a time they created wine, maybe 12,000 years ago or not, and they called it wine. And then the wine got sour, and they used the word in French, auger, and called it vinegar, wine soured. They didn't have noni
Right.
in those areas. But what if they did? Noni is a low sugar, low starch fruit that matures automatically and autonomously without requiring fermentation, and it
Right.
has a slight bitterness or a mild bitterness, maybe like 65% dark chocolate in bitterness. If you had a swig of noni and then bit off a little bit of a dark chocolate bar, you'd go, oh. If you had noni and then you tasted sparkling water, seltzer water, you'd go, ah, they're kind of the same in
Yeah.
their quality, in the taste quality. Hits about the same place on the tongue.
Kombucha too. Yeah.
So I imagine a time when you have a shelf and you have your apple cider vinegar, and next to it you have a new product that is vinamer,
Yeah.
or a selection of different kind of vinamers, wine bitters, or mature fruit that's bittered, that's matured through the ketogenic pathway instead of the glucogenic pathway. And I don't think noni's the only one we're going to find. I mean, it's the one we have right now. But when we go into the jungles and we look for fruit that's falling off the tree because it ripens so quickly, we're going to look at it and we're going to find out that it's producing a vinamer
Mm.
that may have some nutritive benefit or usefulness in our diets
Mm.
that brings us into a balance. And I
Right.
think of noni as an analog to vinegar. It's a non-vinegar vinegar. For years I tried to figure out, why can't I call it a vinegar? Why can't I call it a wine? Well, it doesn't have enough alcohol or acetic acid to meet the definition of either of those,
Yeah.
which both require 4% of each ingredient by volume to be defined as a wine or a vinegar.
Mm.
That's where kombucha ran into a problem, because their GT was raising their alcohol level was up to 4% by volume. They were saying, look, you're going to have to classify as an alcoholic beverage. And then they did something, and you look, the black label
Hmm.
has a special warning on it, and it does have enough alcohol to be considered a wine.
Hmm.
So a lot of the joy that people get out of kombucha, that, oh, it feels so good, it's alcohol. You're drunk, mildly drunk. I remember pushing the baby carriage through the zoo going, whoa, I feel great. I'm lit. That's why.
Well, okay. So I did feel something with kombucha that I also feel with this, and that it would give me like, it's not that it wasn't for me anyway, a buzz, an alcohol buzz, but almost like a alkaline. You're right. I just felt like I
Yeah.
was becoming more alkaline, and suddenly I was a little bit more alive. I'm like, and I think that's from the living qualities of it. So it does have
Mhm.
some benefits to the if you compare it with the other stuff that you're drinking, and a lot of people are
Yeah.
so acidic and they don't even know what it feels like for their bodies to like have a balanced pH. So it does kind
And
of,
I'm not saying kombucha is bad. I'm just saying you got to be aware.
oh
You know,
yeah.
you got to be aware.
But
Yeah.
it's interesting to bring up because it's so accepted now. I know
Hmm.
when I was pregnant with my first kid, I almost changed gynos because my gynecologist didn't know what kombucha was. So I was into kombucha. I was making that stuff before Whole Foods had it.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
I was like a little wizard, and I would tell people about it. But then I also started to notice how much sugar. I was like, oh my God, because I was making it, I was using so much sugar. And I would have issues with it not being like as bubbly as I liked. And I just felt like it was a lot of trouble. And I stopped really feeling much more past these like alkalinizing benefits. And there were some digestive benefits as well. It was great, but it's nothing compared to what I feel when it comes to this stuff. Like it just doesn't even hold a candle to it. And yet there's like just a lot of negative press out there.
Noni is a food that produces fresh fruit every day. So think about if you have a fruit that produces fresh fruit every day and you bring it with you, bring the seeds with you, you plant it wherever you go, like Johnny Appleseed with apples, everyone will have food.
Yeah.
And this is likely the reason we have it all the way around the equator. And in any place you go where you find noni, and why people from everywhere can say, oh, I had noni growing in my backyard growing up, and I didn't even know it was a healthy food.
Why do you
Um,
think people didn't know? Why do you think it's something that's been so, I mean, I know that there's the kind of the obvious, what the FDA has done
I
and
think I
but
think it's as modernity sets in and things become more easy and available, you're gonna swing toward a sugary fruit than a non-sugary fruit. I think that the traditions just become lost,
okay,
and the necessity for it as a food becomes forgotten.
right.
And when you have all these other available foods
All
that
these
have been
choices,
imported
right?
in,
We're spoiled for choice.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what? And think about this. When I grew up, and and I wonder what your dad thinks about this. I drank out of a well. We had a well. We drank well water.
Okay.
And now it almost feels like if I drink well water, I could die.
Well, yeah, so fracking. I'm scared of most
It's
creeks because I don't know what
but
the
but is but now right now I'm in middle Michigan and there's a well and I'm like I'm gonna drink the water out of the well. There's no farms around me, and it feels, oh wait, I could get sick and die. But drinking natural water out of the ground is scary to us now. So we become disconnected from nature. Also in the older in when I grew up, you caught a cold. You couldn't it caught you. It somehow you got sick. You didn't go, you didn't sit back and go, what did I do in my diet the last 3 weeks that led me to being susceptible
Mhm.
to this illness?
Right.
Whereas now we do that. If we get sick, we blame ourselves. I
Yes.
must not have been eating right. I must have, and we're doing that correctly. It is our fault in a lot of instances that we're not that we're susceptible to any illness.
Yeah.
Not every illness, but a good amount of them. And so adding foods like noni and other dietary regimens lead us to being less susceptible to illness and more susceptible to having every day be a good day. Do you notice making different decisions on your eating patterns? Like
Yeah.
your cravings and um your portion sizes and things like that, do they change at all, or do you notice that?
I'm a little bit of a weirdo in that I'm still nursing. I'm nursing a 3-year-old.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I end up like super hungry at like 10 o'clock at night. I'm in the kitchen, like, what can I get? Because I know I'm going to need more calories. But I do notice, and so I sometimes eat more or less depending on my son's appetite. But I have noticed in the past 6 months or so since I've been taking Noni, wanting to be a little bit more vegetarian, just wanting
Mm,
more, craving, not wanting to be, just really craving living raw foods. I still eat meat. I will crave that as well. I still do, but it's not something that I crave kind of, until I feel like my body is really asking for it. My body will ask for the fats and ask for the proteins. Um, but usually at night, when I used to want to have like a meaty dinner in order to feel full and satisfied, I find myself being like wanting to have dinner early, around 6, and kind of feeling done. Like being like, no,
mm.
I feel good. Like I feel like, and then sleeping better too, because you don't have your digestion competing with your, sleeping. Um, so I have noticed those things. And I think again, like when you consume something high vibrational, it makes an impact, and you are going to, well, I am going to want to stay high vibrational. I'm not at the point where I can be vegan. Like I still, maybe because I have kids, I don't know why, maybe because I still need to fight the dark lords, but I still eat meat, and I still like to feel very, very grounded. I don't want to get floaty, and I don't want to lose track of time. I don't want
You don't wanna ascend to the Akashic plane and read the records?
I don't know. Oh, I
You
don't
need
want to read
you
the
need
account.
7 years of vegetarianism to read the Akashic records, here.
That's not true. I read the Akashic records all the time, and I still eat meat, you know what I mean? But the Akashic records will let you know, listen, you're still working through some stuff, and you still have some karma, and you are needing to kind of be here. It's not beneficial. It's not your highest potential in this lifetime, not right now for you to rainbow eyes. You have some shit, you got some shit with the IRS you need to take care of. Like I honestly, like I was vegan. The first time I tried Noni, I was working at a healing center in Santa Monica called Regenesis. And I was like the model slash manager. I worked as a model, and I was super into healing stuff. So I was like, oh, I want this job. I was working as a tarot reader too. And the amount of imbalance that I noted among these highly, spiritual people that had access to high vibrational modalities. They had the vibe machines and the crystal light beds and the life stream, and they were doing the Reiki, and they had angel healers come in. I was setting up workshops for Teal Swan, and it was kind of the mecca for people on the West Coast to have their workshops here. And I was setting up the chairs, for these people, and I was in awe of them. But it became dysfunction junction, right? Um,
Wow.
the ego and the drama and the darkness that was just as strong as the light that they were wanting to bring in is what I noticed, right? The more light they were trying to bring in, the stronger the dark energy was, either within them, or that was attracted to the place, or the financial stuff that happened. My co-manager was a dominatrix in her other job, and had this demon energy. And I mean, it gave me pause, because it made me approach, you know, the spiritual and material world where they converged with a lot more reticence. I'm not just going to assume that something is really good for me just because it's high vibrational. Um,
Mhm, mhm,
because you need to be able to integrate and maintain a vibration. You're not just meant to covet, um, you know, commune with the angels when you're not, being honest with yourself. So there's just like all these disconnects that I'm noticing. And food is the same way. Just to kind of come full circle with this, is
mhm.
that so many people just like to place value judgments on a person's diet or on their diet and talk about it in terms of vibration. This is a high vibrational food, or this is a high vibrational diet, and this is low vibrational. Um,
Right.
the only thing that I think is important when it comes to like our consumption of food is the energy with which it was created and the intent behind it, and how animals were treated. I do believe that we can ingest cortisol from animals, and how they were treated in their pain
Hmm.
body. We can ingest that, and that can really be harmful. But I don't think it's important to, or even relevant for every person to identify a diet as good or bad, right? And even something like Noni Juice, someone might try the first couple times that I took it, and I'd say the first couple times, the first 4 bottles that I went through, I was taking like sips, very small sips in the morning, and that felt like enough and all that I needed or really wanted. And without knowledge of how much I should be taking, I just couldn't help myself. And I decided after a while, like, if I am craving more of this, I'm going to trust that that's okay. I'm going to trust my
Hmm.
body in that respect. And I'm glad after learning from you that it's not harmful. We do need to be aware of the potassium amount that, we're needed, but I don't drink a whole bottle at once. It's too expensive.
There are
Um,
people who have.
yeah. And they're good.
Well, yeah, they're good. They're good. One of the craziest testimonials was a woman with a stage 4 brain cancer, and it was inoperable, and she had 6 weeks to live. And all of a sudden, one of my distributors started ordering 8 gallons at a time. Back then, we were selling by the gallon. And I was like, what's going on? And he told me that she had found this old recommendation from the Tahitian Noni company they used to give out called Recommendations for Serious Illness. And they would have you drink 32 ounces a day for 12 days and then cut it in half until every 12 days until you got to 4 ounces. And she did that. And she came back with no brain tumor at all. And she lived another, I just talked to a guy who knew her. I did get a testimonial from her. She lived for another 6 years and she died of alcoholism.
Okay. She wasn't putting the noni juice in her alcohol. That's what she should have been doing. I'm just kidding.
It'd be, I mean, kind of sad, but
Yeah. Well, here's the thing is that sometimes we are extremists, and our extremism is going to get us in one way or the other, right? It is all about balance, and you can cure the brain tumor, but it's important that everything be done holistically, right? And holistic means that you're not just focusing on the nutrients, and you've got to focus on your mood, and you're not just focused on your diet. You have to focus on diet and exercise and your mood and your stress and your spiritual well-being and your third chakra, all that stuff. It's
yeah.
the whole. um and that's something that we're all going to have to sort of I feel like work out for ourselves on an individual level, even though there's more and more information out there. WebMD is going to tell us how to live holistically. Um, and the definitions of that are going to be different for each
Right.
person.
Well, one really interesting thing, if you go to the doctor and you're in pain, they'll say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad does it hurt? And 10 is, they laugh at people who say 9 or 10 because you can't even speak when you're at that level of pain. It's like an arbitrary thing, but on that scale, if someone said 9, they're not feeling pain, they think they're lying.
Mm.
Why don't they ask us when we go in for our general checkup, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good do you feel?
Right.
We want to get you up to a 7. And then if you're laughing and you're having a good time, you can, every now and then you can't even speak. You're rolling on the floor laughing and giggling like you're at an evangelical seance.
Right.
Oh, Lord, you're like out of your mind, blissful. And we're going to make sure that you feel those feelings.
Yeah.
But our current standard is numbness is normal.
Right.
Our homeostasis is you don't feel pain, but you don't feel too much joy.
Right.
That way we can sell you joy
Right. Oh
in
God.
songs and movies and books and programs and amusement parks and concerts, and you go out and you pay for the joy. We're going to make sure you're neutral so that you need that stuff
Mm-hmm.
and you're not producing it yourself.
Right.
But I think our culture is moving towards self-producing, you know. Look at TikTok and things like that. People are producing their own
Well, they're gonna have to.
uh,
I mean, even, you know, if we're very hackable. YouTube is hackable, so is Instagram and TikTok. It can be taken away. All of the things that we're using for our little serotonin boost could be taken away.
Mhm.
Anytime I go anywhere with my kids, it's $200 at least. You know what I mean? Chuck E. Cheese, you're going to drop $250 in Chuck E. Cheese now.
Man.
It's
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
the fair, so it's sort of like, I think it's just better for us. We're going on a little road trip tomorrow, and I'm like, we're going to be going through parts of the country where we're not going to have access to internet, and we're going to be doing some, off-roading, some camping, and the kids are going to be bored. And I'm like, I think I'm so excited for just to sort of be stripped of the things that we go to religiously, myself included, for connection, for stimulation, um for joy, for entertainment, or all of it. It's just something that I'm like, we're losing the ability to sort of self-produce or self-contain, or have our world be something that we create and that we take with us without a device, without something that we're tethered to. Um, and I think that
Mhm.
it is going to be uncomfortable for a little while, because people are going to have experiences where it's like, oh, no power, and now you're kind of feeling shitty, aren't you? Oh, no internet, you're feeling kind of, oh, your social credit score, oh, sorry, your Instagram is down. But it can lead to a kind of renaissance, in a way. It's why people who like grew up on the East Coast are a little more deep. It's because sometimes we just couldn't go outside. We couldn't see our friends. We just, you're just like an Emily Dickinson, like, sitting in your house looking at a certain slant of light, and you're just like,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of like how I grew up. So it it made me more at ease with, just any kind of restriction or discomfort. During COVID, I wasn't really bothered by not being able to go to the mall, and I was bothered by other aspects of it, but just the disconnection to me felt like, oh, in some ways we're kind of not able to do all of the band-aid stuff. And I'm left to my own
Mhm.
devices, and it's not so bad. It's okay to not need to be like a machine, um, and to turn your, wisdom or charisma into a commodity for, you know, it's like there.
It'd be good to find the balance to be able to be yourself and do
Yeah,
what you're called and love to do.
when you
Not
want.
what I mean by that is this. I could talk this way for 3, 4, 12 more hours. I love communicating and thinking, and speculating becomes speculatory, becomes
Yeah,
an adventure.
yeah,
And I feel like we're evolving. We're working toward evolution. And that is the work that really calls to me. I know I'm in a Noni position, and I
mm,
bring it back to Noni to try and, when I'm done with Noni, it's the tree itself keeps the earth on its axis. It just the resonant frequency of the plant itself is important for the earth, but we are too. And our resonant frequencies can shift the balance of the earth toward a better, more beautiful place.
yeah,
And to be a part of that, and to know you're being a part of that and then be rewarded for it, wouldn't that be really great to
yeah,
be able to be seen, known? Like you talk about Teal Swan. I mean, I'm sure that she sits on a pedestal and speaks somewhat of a psychology that she created herself.
mhm. She's
But I'm
big in.
sure in her heart she believes that she's helping the world. and bringing the world to a
Yeah.
higher vibrational resonance,
And
even though
it's
she
an
can be mean
automatic. It's
spirited.
not something you have to work on. It just flows from you, and it's maybe
Yeah.
not everyone's answer, but
And the
it
world has rewarded her
yeah.
for being her authentic self, whatever good or bad or not, cultish or not. And in answer to your thought about is meat good, is this diet good or that diet good, that model, maybe sometime I can share it with you because it brings it all into balance. And it shows how any diet could be the perfect diet in a sense,
Yeah.
but it's about the balance, metabolically balancing your diet and then knowing who you want to be and what your target is for how you want to feel.
Mm.
And that kind of shifts and changes things around. It always bothers me when I find people who've done a lot of fasting or they're Olympic athletes, they're at the peak of their game, but they don't seem to articulate or express a spiritual awakening.
Mm.
I'm like confused by that a little bit because they're clearly resonating high frequencies and their light is shining through the entire human spectrum. They've attained something.
I know people like this. I actually dated someone for quite a few years that like spiritually did not really have a clue. Although he did try, it was almost as though everything was just, I bring in information from the spirit down, like it disseminates into my being. Whereas for him, it was from the earth up. So it's like I noticed it was just a difference in how like the approach and the way the information was um filtered from important to not was just in reverse. And it wasn't necessarily less spiritual, but they didn't have the concepts because they weren't important in order for this person to be motivated. They weren't motivated by the spiritual concepts. They were motivated by the material, benefits. But they were actually really good at automatically having like a discernment about what was pure and what was correct and what was in integrity. So the approach to nutrition and all that was like filled with so much integrity, like that you say this person was vibrating at higher levels, but they didn't necessarily have the spiritual understanding to have implications in their personal life or in their emotional life or in relationships. But I don't know that it was their purpose for to do that, right? Because there are some of us that are meant to hold light and hold frequencies. Like if you look at the rays, like we all have different rays. I'm like got some, green and blue are my primary rays. So that is what I kind of, the frequencies that I'm more inclined to work with, benefit from, and exhibit and share with the world. And there are other people that have different rays, some people scientific, and it's your purpose. And if you are focusing or allowing yourself to integrate more with other frequencies and other lifetimes, and you're going to awaken your DNA, then you're going to actually end up bringing in a lot of other frequencies or other rays. But the majority of people, even people that approach spirituality or high vibe nutrition, are just operating through one ray. And it's like saying a bus driver, like we got to have bus drivers, we got to have people that are just content to,
Yeah.
to
Well,
drive the kids
what
to
was
school.
interesting about taking all the foods and laying it out at the period of time in history that we began eating them, and
Okay.
then recognizing that stages of
Of
development
development in society.
occurred along that same spectrum.
That's
And the
fascinating.
chakras also represent stages of development as well, but they were intermingled with states.
Mhm.
Integral took apart the states and the stages and kind of distinguished the difference between them. But if you look at the stages, particularly the first six, even that are cognitively cross-culturally identical around the whole world. They may differ a little bit in this time at which, depending on cultural influence, when a child might reach the second to third to fourth stage of cognitive development.
Yes.
You can imagine that the food that you choose colors the energetic metabolic disposition that plugs into that stage.
Mm.
So if you change the food, you change your stage.
Oh,
And
interesting.
if you change your stage, you have to change your food to
Oh,
meet the requisite of the cognitive level and recognition of that stage, because each stage has its own way of looking and expressing itself through the world and seeing the world even. And that
wow.
just blew my mind. Just think about, one of the funny thoughts is they had fried chicken at the crucifixion because they had oil and they had chicken and they had bread. So there was somebody probably walking around with a
Probably
bucket of
frying some
fried chicken saying fried chicken at the
wonder they
crucifixion
love it in the
2000
chat.
years ago. 2000 years ago. So we're participating in a diet that's 2000 years old. We have the mental faculties of that stage. We broke through to pluralistic mentalities and rational mentalities only like 400 to 500 years ago. There's that intermission of those two mentalities crossing over and creating our current culture. And a war, you might say, between fundamental right thinking and liberal left thinking is that
Wow.
conversation and transition. And you can see the evolution of our humanity into, across the tipping point, into a more enlightened or awakened society, or rather than that, we should say embracing a more expanded and inclusive society
Yeah.
that sees through boundaries and barriers. And we're moving across that barrier. But to think that a mentality can be fueled by a diet is kind of scary, because you have to say what you're eating is causing the problem that we have right now. It's causing our inability to agree. It's
Maybe.
causing our debate and our discussion and our problem in some instances. But people, you can't tell people what to eat. And
What you
you
can say.
can't tell people that, and it's like in that scene in by in where Woody Harrelson is talking to Robert Downey Jr. in Natural Born Killers, and he goes, "Across from me, you're just a meat eater. You're just an animal from where I'm sitting." That is it's a funny, like a spiritual contrast, like in the differences between states of consciousness. That's how they feel about each other.
Right.
And
But that's
and
also
that's
part of the grand design, because that contrast is what we're here to have and explore and bump up against. So as there is no right. There's no person who is right when it comes to what expression is.
there's
Um,
people that are more right though.
well, when you say right, does right mean more closer to God, closer to their authentic self, closer to what is, right from a moralistic standpoint? Because what I'm saying by right is that when God views us as going, going left, um, we don't lose God's love. We don't lose acceptance. We don't lose, you know, help if we ask for it. It's all under the umbrella of are my child, and you're going to make mistakes. And,
Mm.
as long as you're on the earth, you're never going to get it all right, and you're never going to get it done. You're not going to get it done here. Even a monk.
But you run into a problem when you run into a culture that's been isolated from modern culture, and they're cannibals.
Oh, yeah. Right, you run into a problem with cannibalism for sure. Why did I think of that? Very good point. But I sort
And
of
when you're talking to your
know.
and when you're talking to your children and you're teaching them rational behavior and ethical behavior,
Right.
and they haven't developed that yet.
But it's if someone if someone has or a commute culture has a penchant for cannibalism, it's definitely not going to go in their favor, but it's like that's it it's their right to discover on a spiritual level. It's their right to discover their wrongness. It's their
Well,
right.
you know how the Christians solved cannibalism.
Yeah,
They fed them Jesus through the blood and the through the wine and the bread, and transubstantiated the living God into the food. But it's still a cannibalistic, the
yeah,
body of Christ and the blood of Christ. It's still a cannibalistic ritual. I'm Catholic,
it's very interesting.
and it transmuted the sacrifice into food so that you didn't have to kill the king and eat him,
Yeah,
and you didn't have to drink the blood of your enemies anymore. Religion played a role in transitioning from a literal a literal design to a metaphorical tradition. And that was a cognitive leap, and is one of the stages of transition from taking things literal
really to making them representative, metaphorical.
and to being able to move into the metaphorical.
Well, you look at, in churches, how you go to the Grove, which is a shopping center in Los Angeles,
Mm-hmm.
go into the movie theater, and it's just like this giant, like it's a dome. And
Mm.
there are heads of children, stone heads, and there's no wings. They're not cherubs, aligning the top. And it's like, you don't really think twice about it at first because you're just like, oh, kids. And then you're like, wait. The architecture like behind that place is so freaky because anybody who actually looks at what it has ever meant in anywhere in history and time, when a head was raised, it meant that that was a dead person.
Mm.
It's not an angel if it's a person, and it's a dead. So but there, I mean, it's human sacrifice, child sacrifice. I mean, that is unfortunately something that is not, it's, I think, on in certain in certain social circles, it's still a thing. Um, and it's interesting because I was on Reddit last night, and it's a very terrible habit of mine to look at Reddit before I go to bed. But I'm sometimes just like, I want more stuff in my head, weird stuff. And I'm
Yeah.
on the conspiracy Reddit forum, and someone has asked the question, what is one conspiracy that you think is absolutely true that no one actually wants to think about or admit? And, someone was like that human sacrifice was, things were not done Stonehenge. And like, I frolicked in the hilly brush in Ireland and went to a bunch of different stone circles. And they don't tell you this in a lot of the, leaflets that you get about, Dromebeg Stone Circle. But, this was a place where these druids were sacrificing. And it's not so much that they were just, you know, evil. It's that they believed in a real power exchange. They were really like, This is actually something that there's a transaction happening here, and there's a greater benefit to to everybody if we make this small sacrifice. And that's just across just about every culture. Sacrifice and human
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice was at the basis of it, because it was, and we'd like to think that people, they were just so, you know they were just so backward and just so wrong. It's like, I I wasn't around, I don't know exactly, but I do believe that they were doing it for a purpose that was not as, dark as we think. I mean, we do awful things right now, as a whole country. We sacrifice whole other groups of people. So anyway, I know that this conversation, I'm
Mhm.
just like going on a bit of a tangent here. Um, but I'm just saying like it's, to eliminate the need to kill, um, in order to cross a threshold where you might be able to extract power, or have some kind of line of communication, or whatever the method, whatever the reason or the root of the reason is. um, it's like I do believe still being done, to this day. And I do think it's a good thing if we have actually made it into some, we've transmuted it, like you said, into something that's a metaphor. If there can be good intention behind the metaphor, like I'm
Mhm.
embodying, I'm embodying Christ, Um, I wish we could do that in a way that was, devoid of any kind of violence, because I don't think that that's
Well,
necessary.
the scary thing is that if that hadn't been developed, they would most of those individuals would still be acting with that kind of behavior. They would still be eating their enemies.
Right. But
And
it was just not, it was, I it's interesting though, because it's not as though after creating this metaphor for, um, communion, it's not as though the Catholic Church became, just
stopped, right.
stopped doing naughty things and,
Yeah, it's not like they stopped murdering every single person that didn't agree with them.
all the things, taking the land from the
Right.
women, all of it. Like
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
it's just that they just didn't want to get dirty. They were like, let's just make it look, keep it tight, make it look a little clean. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I mean, and so here we are, and I think
Yeah.
that the um th- the interesting thing about food, though, just to wrap things up, this is
Mhm.
something that I could do forever also. I love it, but I actually ironically have a doctor's appointment I've got to go to. Um, is that we all need to eat. We have to make this choice, and there are people that are in a position where it's like, oh, I'm sorry, you live in this household in this part of the world, and this is what you're having. This is what your option is. You don't have another option. I know I'll give my kid a pouch. If he won't eat the pouch, I'll be like, how about a hot dog? If he doesn't want a hot dog, I'm like, I'll make you grilled cheese. Like, I'll, there, that doesn't happen, or probably shouldn't happen anywhere, but like that doesn't happen in a lot of places, and people are just having to accept, and then at some point they individuate if they have that opportunity, and then they make their own choices. But then we also are inundated with what we're told is healthy and what we're told is good, and what our supplemental, what our nutritional standards are, and the values of everything, um, and how the individual feels and responds immediately, how it feels when they have something is the last thing that they consider. um, it takes a pretty enlightened and, almost an arrogant person to just go around saying, "Oh, no, I don't really feel like that right now. No, I know when my daughter doesn't want a banana, when I want her to have a banana, I am just like, "Ugh, what are you talking about? You wanted a banana yesterday morning, and why not today?" But she's actually really listening to her body and what her nutritional needs are. Kids are really good at that sort of stuff. And
Mm.
we're not, always in the position to make those kinds of choices. We might be, discouraged from, like I said, it seems almost narcissistic, or um, to, to have dietary, restrictions, or people say they're allergic. I used to say I was allergic to things, but the spiritual implications are there, but they're individual, and we owe it to ourselves to really say, how does this feel? How does this make me feel? Um, I think it's not going to be taught until it, becomes some kind of trend, or someone like maybe you can, get on a platform and speak to the value of our, taking nutrition into our own hands and taking the power back as consumers. So,
Mhm.
but while we're at it, I want to, just circle back and encourage everyone, please try this stuff because I I just think it really works. And if you want to go ahead and Google benefits or watch other videos about these benefits, that's one thing. But I just think that um, you're, if you're at all interested in exploring, whole foods that have a proven track record of supporting humanity beyond its expectations and, just really giving us uh, a kind of it feels like grace. For lack of a better word, like I feel like when I take a swig of this stuff, I'm like, thank you, because maybe I was on Reddit. Maybe it wasn't just my kids. Maybe I could have gone to bed earlier, but at least now it's like forgiveness and the inflammation is down. It feels like a balm to my whole being. So I'm so grateful for it. And there is a link below in the description, the website where you can purchase Noni Juice from this most reputable source where they get it from a farm instead of having it processed and mixed with a bunch of crappy juices and sugars and syrups. Um, that's the way to do it.
Yes,
So
and it's healingnoni.com. And if anyone has any questions, they can call 877-662-4610 and they'll actually talk to me because I am our only customer service representative.
So if there's anyone out there that is interested in trying Noni and the best of the best out there and at a discount, I suggest you click on that link below that I provided, and that'll take you directly to the website where you can get your Noni and you get a nice little discount too, because it's kind of pricey. It's worth it, but it's kind of pricey. It's an investment for sure. Thank you again so much, Sean. This has been really eye-opening. And anybody out there that's listening, if you have something to add, if you want to share a story, if you have a testimonial, feel free to put it in the comments, or you can contact John if you've been using Noni and you want to have a question, like you said, or you want to share your testimonial or anything. So we appreciate all communication from our fans and anyone interested in this Noni juice. Some people call it Nani. I called my mom Nani.
So
It's Noni for me, but if you say Nani, say Noni, whatever.
okay. Yeah.
Alrighty. Okay, well that wraps it up. Thank you guys so much, and until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.